Hello everyone, bonjour à toutes et à tous. Bienvenue à la session éclair de l'AINB sur le renouvellement de l'immatriculation et le PMC. Welcome to NAMB's lightning session on registration renewal and CCP, a mandatory component of maintaining your license to practice nursing in New Brunswick. We recognize many of you may have questions or require clarification, and so we've prepared this brief presentation and will provide a Q&A to follow. Using Zoom technology to engage with you today, we've experienced turning everyone's video and audio off ensures stronger connection and better quality for the participants. Recognizing the large group joining us, we would ask that questions get typed into the chat box. Compte tenu du grand nombre de personnes présentes aujourd'hui, nous vous demandons d'écrire vos questions dans la zone de clavardage. Pour trouver la fonction de clavardage, déplacez lentement votre pointeur en bas de votre écran. L'option devrait apparaître vers le milieu. Cliquez et la zone de clavardage apparaîtra sur la droite. You can locate the chat feature by hovering over the bottom of your screen. The option should appear towards the middle, and if you select it, it will appear to the right of your screen. Then you can type your question. We will take note of questions received and address them in the order for which they appear. If you experience technical difficulties or require assistance, please also include feedback in the chat. Staff will be monitoring your comments and will attempt to assist where possible. La présentation sera faite dans les deux langues officielles et nous vous encourageons à poser des questions dans la langue de votre choix. The presentation will be delivered in both official languages, and we encourage you to ask questions in your language of choice. Now allow me to present my colleagues, Colin Leahy, Registrar, and Kate Shepard, Senior Advisor, Practice and Education. Let's get started. Over to you, Colin.
Thanks, Jen. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this evening's lightning session. Bonsoir tout le monde. Merci de vous avoir joint à nous pour notre session éclair de ce soir. So today we're going to be talking about registration renewal by exploring the following questions. Why do I need to renew my registration? When can I renew my registration? Where can I renew my registration? What do I need to do to qualify for registration renewal? And this is where, for a portion of it, I'll be passing the mic over to my colleague, Kate Shepard, who will be speaking about the continuing competency program and what registration status is best for me. Donc, nous allons commencer avec le pourquoi. Donc, pourquoi dois-je renouveler mon immatriculation? Donc, il est important de savoir qu'exercer la profession infirmière sans détenir une immatriculation valide est illégal. C'est-à-dire que si une infirmière exerce la profession après la date limite du 30 novembre sans avoir renouvelé son immatriculation, il se peut qu'elle doive verser des frais pour exercice non autorisé. Donc, ça, c'est un frais de 287,50 $. Et de plus, elle ne pourra pas compter les heures travaillées comme heures de pratique infirmière. On parlera de l'exigence des heures de pratique dans quelques instants. De plus, elle ne sera pas couverte par la protection responsabilité professionnelle. Donc, c'est-à-dire que si ma collègue Kate, qui est infirmière immatriculée, ne renouvelle pas son immatriculation avant la date limite du 30 novembre et elle exerce sa profession le 1er et le 2 décembre, les heures qu'elle travaille ces 2 jours-là ne pourront pas compter vers son renouvellement pour l'année de pratique prochaine, donc l'année de pratique 2023. Elle ne sera pas couverte par la protection responsabilité professionnelle et elle pourrait avoir à déverser des frais. So now on to the when. When can I renew my registration? So NAMB's renewal period runs from October 1st to November 30th. There are 2 important things to note here. Firstly, although renewal is accessible to our members 24/7, registration support services are only available Monday to Friday from 8:30 to 4:30. So if a nurse or nurse practitioner tries to renew, or registered nurse or nurse practitioner tries to renew their registration at, say, 10 p.m. on the 30th of November and encounters issues, they will not be able to access support until the next morning. And if they were scheduled to practice the next morning, which is the beginning of the practice year, they would not be able to go to work until they had successfully renewed. Secondly, the deadline for nurses participating in payroll deduction programs through their employers is November 15th. If you participate in a payroll deduction program and miss that deadline, then you will have to pay for your registration using a debit or credit card, just as any other nurse or nurse practitioner would. And the fees collected by your employer would be returned to them and then to you. Et maintenant pour le où. Où puis-je renouveler mon immatriculation? Donc, pour renouveler votre immatriculation, vous devez naviguer vers le site web de la INB et ensuite vers votre profil. Tout en haut de la... il va y avoir un bouton qui dit « Mon profil » tout en haut de la page. Ensuite, quand vous accédez à votre profil, il va y avoir un bouton qui dit « Accéder au renouvellement de l'immatriculation » tout en haut de votre profil. Il y a 3 choses à noter ici. Si vous devez réinitialiser votre mot de passe et que vous ne recevez pas de courriel après avoir pesé le bouton, car il va y avoir un bouton qui dit réinitialiser votre mot de passe. Si vous pesez le bouton et vous ne recevez pas de courriel, vous devez contacter les services à l'immatriculation ici à la INB qui vont vous aider à réinitialiser votre mot de passe. Et de plus, pour accéder à votre profil, votre nom d'utilisateur va être votre numéro d'immatriculation. Si vous complétez le module d'apprentissage obligatoire, juste avant de renouveler, donc si vous accédez à votre compte, vous faites le module obligatoire et ensuite vous tentez immédiatement de renouveler, il faut en premier lieu vous déconnecter de votre profil et ensuite vous reconnecter. Ça laisse les deux systèmes, le système du module et le système d'immatriculation, se parler et mettre votre profil à jour. Finalement, si vous avez couramment un statut non actif, vous ne pouvez pas renouveler en ligne. Alors, vous devez le faire en contactant les services à l'immatriculation qui vont ensuite vous envoyer un formulaire à remplir à la main. So what do I need to do to qualify for registration renewal? So as you access the online renewal page, throughout the renewal process, you'll be asked to provide up-to-date information for your contact information for your employer. Evidently, it's important to keep those things up to date, but in terms of registration requirements for renewal, there are 3 big ones. So nurses must have worked the minimum amount of hours, they must provide proof of good character, and they must complete the current year's continuing competence program. So that means that to renew your registration for 2022, which begins on December 1st, you must complete your 2021 CCP. Donc, le premier prérequis au renouvellement, comme il y a tout juste de mentionner, c'est les heures de pratique infirmière. Donc, une infirmière immatriculée qui veut renouveler son immatriculation pour l'année de pratique 2022 doit avoir, dans les derniers 5 ans, c'est-à-dire entre 2017 et 2021, elle doit avoir travaillé 1125 heures en tant qu'infirmière immatriculée ou gradué d'un programme de formation en sciences infirmières ou avoir suivi avec succès un programme de réintégration à la profession. Il est aussi important de noter que lorsque vous complétez le compte-rendu de vos heures de pratique, il n'est pas suffisant de rapporter le minimum de 1125 heures. Vous devez faire un compte-rendu de tous vos heures travaillées. C'est-à-dire que si vous avez plus qu'un employeur, mais que vous avez les 1125 heures avec votre employeur primaire, il faut tout de même continuer et faire un compte-rendu de tous vos heures travaillées. Donc, avec votre employeur secondaire, et cela inclut du travail de bénévolat en tant qu'infirmier ou infirmière ou du travail en pratique autonome. So for NPs, the hours of practice time frame is a little shorter. It's 3 years. So an NP wishing to renew their registration for the 2022 practice year must have in the last 3 years, so 2019, 2020, and 2021, they must have practiced 900 hours in primary health care. They must have graduated from an approved nurse practitioner education program, or they must have completed an approved nurse practitioner refresher program. There is an exception to that rule, and that is that nurse practitioners who practice 300 hours in the last 12 months So if they had practiced in 2021, 300 hours, they also qualify for registration. And once again, for nurse practitioners, it's important to report all hours worked. And that includes self-employed practice as well as volunteer work. So the second requirement is that of providing proof of good character. You may recall that when you became initially registered as an RN or an NP with NANB, you were asked to provide a criminal record check. That's because criminal record checks are one way that regulatory bodies use to assess whether or not an applicant for registration or for renewal of registration has the requisite good character to practice that profession. And so at Renewal, we ask that registered nurses and nurse practitioners update that information by answering the question that you see on your screens. So throughout your renewal process, you'll be asked to answer the following question. Since you last applied for registration, have you been charged with or convicted of a criminal offense? Now, this is not to say that all criminal convictions or charges will infer a lack of good character. The criminal charge or conviction may be unrelated to the applicant's practice as a nurse or nurse practitioner, or it could be so exceptional that it does not actually reflect the applicant's character. Decisions concerning past charges or convictions are made on a case-by-case basis. So if you answer yes to this question, NANB may ask for further details. That being said, what I would like you to take away today and what's important to know is that not all criminal charges or convictions will lead to a finding by NANB that you do not have the requisite good character to be an RN or NP and NB. So it's important to be honest and truthful when answering that question and to provide as much detail as possible if you answer yes. Donc, je vais maintenant passer la parole à Kate, qui va vous parler du troisième prérequis au renouvellement, ce qui est le programme de maintien de la compétence.
Thanks, Colin, and welcome everyone. The next couple slides will be about the Continuing Competence Program. CCP serves to support nurses in determining their learning needs and promote the maintenance and enhancement of competencies while supporting professional development and public protection. CCP has 4 steps. The first is a self-assessment, which requires us as nurses to reflect on our nursing practice and self-assess against our standards of practice to determine our learning needs. The second step is the development and implementation of a learning plan, and then evaluation of the impact of the learning activities on our nursing practice. The goal of the first 2 steps is to support reflection and promote maintenance or growth in a formalized manner on our practice at least once annually. The third step is a mandatory learning module. The purpose of the learning module is to ensure that you are aware of legislation, regulation, standards, or guidelines that affect our nursing practice. This year's learning module is documentation and consists of a review of the standards for documentation, watching a short 15-minute webinar, and completing a quick 12-question quiz on which you must achieve a minimum of 80%. The final step is a record of learning activities. This step is optional. It is a place for you to record any learning activities that you've participated. These activities can be related to your learning plan or unrelated. Think of it as your own portfolio, a place where you would look if you're applying for a new position or if you're going for an interview and wanted to refresh on what you have done for learning activities over the past year. Les 2 prochains diapositives démontrent un exemple de calendrier de PMC. Le PMC est un processus continu qui se déroule tout au long de l'année. Pour vous préparer à la date limite d'inscription en novembre, vous devriez commencer en décembre en effectuant votre auto-évaluation et choisir les indicateurs sur lesquels vous aimeriez vous concentrer au cours des 11 mois à venir. Ensuite, élaborez un plan d'apprentissage lié aux indicateurs que vous avez choisis. Je vous recommanderais de terminer cette étape avant décembre ou janvier. Les quelques mois à venir visant à effectuer des activités d'apprentissage reliées aux indicateurs que vous voulez conserver ou développer. Chaque fois que vous terminez une activité, vous pouvez mettre à jour votre plan d'apprentissage. Je vous recommande de faire une mise à jour en mars, puis encore une fois en juin pour assurer de ne rien oublier et pour éviter d'attendre aux dernières minutes. Your learning plan can also change throughout the year. For example, if you've changed jobs, indicators that you've chosen or your learning plan may change, and that's okay. As Renewal is now open and the registration deadline is November 30th, now is a great time to go into your learning plan, record all completed learning activities, and evaluate their impact on your practice. This ensures that step 1 and 2 are completed. Step 3, the learning module, also needs to be completed prior to registration renewal. This is available through your My Profile. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see information related to CCP and how to direct to the learning module. Step 4, record of learning activities can also be accessed at any point throughout the year through your My Profile. Des ressources reliées au PMC se trouvent sur le site web de l'AINB à l'onglet Pratique infirmière en cliquant sur PMC. Il y a également une FAQ sur le PMC où vous trouvez rapidement plusieurs bonnes questions et réponses. Back to you, Colin.
Merci, Kate. Et donc, pour notre dernière question, on va se tourner vers lequel. Donc, quel statut d'immatriculation est le meilleur pour moi? Évidemment, si vous avez l'intention de pratiquer la profession infirmière en tant qu'infirmière immatriculée ou infirmière praticienne, que ce soit pour une journée, une semaine, un mois ou toute l'année, il est important d'être pleinement immatriculé avec une immatriculation pleine et active. Par contre, tout dépendant de vos plans, pour l'année 2022, il pourrait y avoir des statuts d'immatriculation plus appropriés pour vous. Donc, si vous êtes en congé prolongé, par exemple, un congé de maternité, maladie, invalidité, etc., et que vous ne prévoyez pas exercer la profession après le 30 novembre 2021, il pourrait être financièrement avantageux pour vous de demander le statut de membre non actif. Ce statut pourrait être converti plus tard en certificat de membre actif si vous hésitez quant au type de statut de membre qui convient le mieux à votre situation, veuillez communiquer avec les services d'immatriculation. De plus, si vous décidez de ne pas renouveler votre immatriculation, vous devriez démissionner parce que vous ne planifiez pas retourner à la pratique infirmière. Vous devrez démissionner votre immatriculation. Cela assure l'intégrité de votre dossier et vous évitera d'avoir à payer un droit de rétablissement si vous décidez plus tard de renouveler votre immatriculation. Donc, merci beaucoup de vous avoir joint à nous. C'est tout pour notre contenu. Thank you for having joined us. That's all for our content. We will be taking questions that you can type into the chat box. Nous prendrons maintenant des questions que vous pouvez taper dans la zone de clavardage. We did receive a question ahead of time from a nurse who was wondering how to become registered as a graduate nurse practitioner. So registration as a graduate nurse practitioner does not have to be done during the renewal period. It doesn't have to be done in October or November. It can be done at any point throughout the practice year. The most important document to begin that registration process is the confirmation of program completion that NANB receives from your educational institution. Once we receive that, NANB's registration services team can help you become registered for the CNPE, the Canadian Nurse Practitioner Examination. And once you're registered for that, you can then register for a graduate nurse practitioner registration status, under which you can practice for 9 months while you wait to write the exam. That was one question we received by email. Open to answering many more if you have them. So we'll leave the chat box open. Est-ce que je dois... donc, nous avons reçu une question. Est-ce que je dois absolument utiliser le programme maintien des compétences? Est-ce que je peux le faire sur papier? C'est une très bonne question. Nous avons des versions électroniques des paquets du PPC qui sont disponibles sur votre profil. Par contre, il n'est pas nécessaire de les faire à l'ordinateur. Vous pouvez les imprimer et les compléter à la main. Par contre, il est important de les garder pour quelques années pour la possibilité d'une revue par l'AINB. Et si vous voulez recevoir une copie papier des papiers, vous pouvez envoyer un courriel à AINB, à commercial AI. Vous pouvez envoyer un courriel au compte courriel de l'AINB. And now a question for Kate. This comes from Renee. What part did Kate say was optional? So I'll pass that over to you, Kate.
Hi, thanks for the question. So step 4 of the continuing competence program, so record of learning activity, that section is optional. So it's a spot that's available, kind of like a portfolio, so you can record learning activities that you've completed, whether that's related to your learning plan or unrelated to your learning plan. But step 4 is optional. So step 1, your self-assessment, step 2, your learning plan, and step 3, the learning module. Those are mandatory, but step 4 is optional. Thanks for the question.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions coming into the chat box. We do have one question that just came in.
So the question is that I thought I had to start my evaluation self-assessment for the 2021-2022 at the time of my renewal and not in December, like it was mentioned. Is that correct? So the process of CCP is meant to be a prospective process. So what I would say is, so for this year's renewal, in theory, we should have done our self-assessment, say 11 months previous. So what I would say is at this point in the renewal year, we should be completing any learning activities and jotting those down in your worksheets. And then once you've renewed, anytime starting in December or January this year, then you go back and you start new sheets and do your self-assessment, and then choose indicators for what you want to work on for the coming year. So it's kind of, instead of a retrospective process, it's a prospective process, which I know isn't intuitive, but I hope that answers your question. So I know that oftentimes I will say that people do complete so there was a follow-up question to that. And it said that they had done that, but they meant to say 2022, 2023. So some people like to, as they clean up their CCP for the previous year, or as they tidy up all their loose ends and denote any completed learning activities, they like to do their self-assessment for the coming year at that same time. And absolutely, you can start your sheets, really you could start your sheets in theory now for the 2022-2023 renewal year if you wanted to do that. And I do know that some people, because you're already in your My Profile and you're working with the CCP worksheets, some people like to do that. And that is absolutely possible and okay if that works for you. Thanks for the questions.
Thanks, Kate. We have one more question that came in. What's the date range to calculate hours for this past year? So to practice in 2021, the day range would have been from 2016 to 2020. To renew the registration for 2022 practice year, you must have practiced for registered nurses 1,125 hours from 2017 to 2021. And for NPs, it's 900 hours in primary healthcare from 2019 to 2021. Does that answer your question? You're very welcome. Okay, so if there are no further questions, we'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening. We hope this information session was useful, and we would ask you to monitor your emails if you're willing to provide some feedback and suggestions for future topics for lightning sessions. We will be emailing out a request for feedback and for suggestions for future topics in the coming days. So thank you very much. Merci tout le monde de vous avoir joint à nous ce soir. Si vous avez des commentaires ou d'autres questions, on va envoyer une invitation pour des commentaires et du feedback par courriel. Et ça va aussi vous donner l'opportunité d'offrir des suggestions pour des sessions éclairs futures. Donc, merci beaucoup tout le monde. Je vous souhaite une très belle soirée. Passez une belle soirée. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye now.